Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Monday. It's October 13th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And interesting day. Friday was absolutely insane. You can see this big sell-off. It looked like the market was done. And the really interesting part, though, is notice that we bounced off the um, the lower line of the envelope band, and we bounced off the trend line, but closed back inside. And then today we opened up and traded up and closed higher. So it could be nothing more than a correction. We haven't really had a correction back to the trend line in so long. I mean, it's been way back here on, this is June the 23rd. So we have not come back to this trend line till June the 23rd. And so here we are. We came back on October 10th. So from June till October till we came back. So that's the first really full correction all the way back to the trend line. And the first time we've been back to the lower end of the envelope band since way back here in April. So this has been an incredible spike in channel up. And just based on what it looks like here, we could still be headed higher again. So maybe we were overdue for that correction, and maybe we got it all in one day. You don't usually see that happen. Sometimes these sell-offs happen quickly. I mean, this was a pretty strong sell-off, but again, we didn't get back to the trend line here, and we didn't get back to the lower portion of the envelope bands. Here we did. We got back, but notice how we closed inside. So this trend, that's the third touch. So now we've confirmed this trend line, and that's the first touch since way back when, and we're headed higher again. So we'll see if this thing follows on through or not. So far, we have not been able to trade and close above that midline. So we could trade back down again. We may not be done yet, and we could get a break here at some point. So we'll see what happens. But pretty good recovery so far. I mean, we've recovered about half of it, I would say, at least today, or definitely half from the lows, maybe even half from the close, maybe even more than half. So anyway, something to make note of on the daily chart. It looks like we're could turn and go higher again. I mean, it doesn't mean we won't come back and test this again or have a second leg down maybe. But as of now, it looks like we are headed higher again. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. But interesting chart. A crazy day on Friday. Um, I mean, it wasn't out of the ordinary that we had a correction Friday. It's just the size of it. I mean, if you look at that from where we opened to where we closed, it was 184 points. But if you look at the entire day from high to low, I mean, it was almost 300 points at one time. That is huge in the ES. That is massive. That's a massive move for one day and not very common, even on when the market's been crazy. So, anyway, there it is on the daily chart. Let's flip over and look at the 2,000 tick chart and go through today's trades. And it really was just a range day that closed on its highs. So, but let's flip over there and look at it. And here you can see it. We gapped open, trended up, and then spent the rest of the day just going sideways. I actually ended up moving this to the highs. At one time I had it down here where we had more touches across this area, but I ended up moving it up, and we got more touches up here. And I think that's correct. Um, if you look at it, you're playing off the midline all the way across there at that with it set like that. So I think that's pretty close. The problem with a range like this is it's, well, first of all, it looks tight, but it's not. It's 40 points, 40 plus points. So you do have room to trade the trends and trend channels within it, and the other patterns inside it. But at the same time, there's no consistent lows and no consistent highs really. Um, so just draw your trend lines and trade them. That's all you can do. And if you get a setup off the lows or off the highs, play your range rules. So that's really all you can do with this. Not much else you can do. So anyway, we kind of started out down here just before 7, and we were back inside the support area here. And you can see we'd tested it a few times, and basically we get a second entry long here. Notice the new high. You come down, you get a first entry, close outside, move to a new low, reverses, and you get a break above that bar right there would be a second entry long. I like that trade. I like going long there. You get a higher low here, but it's not, that signal bar doesn't qualify. There is a second entry here. I didn't mark this one, but we already had a break and then 2 legs up to a new high, and this is looking a little sideways and congested. I mean, you might argue for that to be at least green. I'm just not crazy about it. You do get a close outside and a new low all in one bar, and it is a second entry on a break above that. The problem is you've got plenty of room to get out, I believe, before you get to the high, which is the main concern. And you can see you got over 2 points there. But your closes were right across here, and there's not any room really if you go long above that bar. So that's a concern. I did mark it green, so you could also argue it's somewhat of a technically the second entry short was here that failed, but it really looks like 2 legs up and then a second entry short, and it fails and goes higher. So it just really depends on how you feel about going long there. We've already had a break and a couple of legs up. But we did just come off the lows, but that doesn't mean we're not going to turn down and make another leg down. So I think that one's a little aggressive. But anyway, we start trending down here, and you get a close outside, and it tried to go lower 2 more times. So that's a triple test. I like going long on that. Technically, there was a second entry long right here. Notice the new high, first entry, second entry. But you're still in that channel working down. There's no close outside, no new low. No, nothing. But by the time you get here, you get a triple test and a nice signal bar that's showing rejection. So I like going long there. Quick, easy move up. Maybe you even get a runner, but it's short-lived. We get a close outside, a new high, and then we notice this is a new low. So this is a double bottom, so that's like a new low. So this is a first entry and then second entry. Technically, it broke higher here and turned back down. But then it went higher again and turned back down. I still think you can go short there, 1 tick below that bar on a lower high / second entry or whatever. And you got plenty of room to the support, and it just keeps on going all the way back down to the lows again. Now, notice you do bounce off the lows again. You get a higher low here. I didn't mark it, but technically you've got a second entry followed by a higher low. So technically, you could argue for that to be at least green. I didn't mark it, but looking back on it, you could argue for that to be green. I'll give you a green on that one. And then you run it up, close outside, new high. Then you're working down, and you get a second entry long here. This breaks lower and turns up. And you should draw your channel here. And notice you got to close outside the new low all in one bar. I don't think you can go long here into that high, but this broke lower first and failed and turned up. So you might argue that, hey, you could enter on that engulfing bar because you got plenty of room back to the highs. But I really think you need to let that close before you enter. And when it closes, it's too close to the resistance up there. But, you know, there's probably going to be somebody that traded it on the engulfing bar, and I could see if you want to be risky, we just came off the lows, so but that doesn't mean we can't come back down here and test it again. So, but I'll give you the green on that, and then when you get the little failed breakout here, definitely if it breaks above that, maybe you ride it back up. You need to wait on a higher low, honestly, and you don't get a higher low, it just takes off. And if you catch this, that's a great move up. And this is actually another trend up here. I didn't draw it either. It doesn't really come into play. You get a close outside. You never make a new high there. You just drop down 2 legs down. And there's a second entry long. But it's an inside bar. Then it's congestion. Same thing here. You get a first entry, and then it breaks higher again. And again, that's just too congested across there. But it runs up. This is just a first entry. Now somebody will say, hey, that's a second entry, but I wouldn't count that as a first entry. That's just sideways. So this is a new high here, and that's just a first entry. You make another new high here, so again, a first entry. So I don't see anything all the way up, and I don't think you want to go short up here either. There's no real setup to go short, and it would have been a great move because it runs straight down, but you just don't get a chance to really enter that. Then you get a first entry there, and this is all congested. So again, that's a first entry, and then you got another. It would have been a second entry when you went long above, when it went higher there, but this turns out just to be sideways stuff. I don't see anything you can enter either direction on that. We drop down here, make a new low. Now this is a higher low. You can't enter that on the engulfing bar even if you know what's going on there. Then it doesn't break above higher on this bar, and then it looks too congested. So, and this signal bar is no good either. So just nothing you can do there to enter. You just have to watch that one go without you. And of course it turns down up here. And again, just no real setup up here. And the bottom just falls out of it, but unfortunately there's no setup there. And then here you need to draw your trend line as well, and there's just nothing there. You can see you're just working up that trend line and it just reverses. There is a second entry here. Notice you get the close outside, and you get a couple of three swings to a new low, and then you break higher there. Again, this is a little risky. You need to wait on a higher low, so I just marked that green. But you still might take that trade. It's still it's three pushes down. I'd recommend you to wait on the higher low, which comes here, and then a few minutes later you actually get a second entry long when it breaks above that. So that's even better. So either one of those would have been fine. And this thing takes off, so you probably get a runner there. Runs up, close outside, a couple of legs to a new high. I didn't mark this, but again, you could argue to maybe go short there. But I think you need a lower high or something else, and you don't get that. But you're just patient. A few minutes later, you get a second entry short. Notice the new low, first entry, pull back, second entry. You could also maybe argue there's a little sideways there, and this is a failed break higher. I like it just on the second entry. And then you get a lower high here as well. Another nice signal bar. Plenty of room to get out there. The rest of these are just first entries. This is all sideways. Nothing here that you can really trade. You can see the little range right across there. I don't see anything you can trade. You get a failed breakout. I don't think you can go short there. This is all too congested. This ends up moving down a little bit. I'd probably argue for it to be right there, but there's still no entry, and there's no long here either. And this thing just takes off. Finally, you get a new high here, and you get a first entry and a pullback, and that's a second entry long on a break above that. You can see there's enough room to get out there. And it is a triple test. That's the other thing. You almost want to wait for this to come back to the EMA at a minimum. But because it's a triple test and a second entry long, and that was a really strong move up. In fact, you might even draw another trend channel here. Like so. You can clearly see that working up through there. So it looks like a spike in channel almost, and that's your first break, and then you get a few moves to a new high, and it comes back. But you end up finding this support across here, and then making a higher low here back inside this support. I like going long there. It's just first entry, but you got at least a triple, quadruple test there. Runs up. You actually get a second entry long here, but the signal bar is no good. Notice that new high, first entry, second entry. It's also just sideways stuff here. And if you had room to scalp out and you got a good signal bar, that would be another reason to take that. Maybe you take that. And I just don't even think you can really count that as a second entry just because you're running sideways and it's real choppy. It does work up, turns back down. We get a close outside in the first entry. And then you make a high or low here, and it actually makes a lower high. Normally, I would say this needs to break lower here to count that as a second entry, but it's a 2-bar matching low, and you make a lower high. So a break above that's definitely a second entry. I did mark it green, but you might go long there. And you can see it's going to, the odds are it's going to run and make a new high. And we hadn't got to the high of the range yet either, so it's a good chance that's where we're headed. That's exactly where we go. You get a second entry here, but no setup. And then you get a lower high, and you'd probably even argue there's a multiple test. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I like going short there. And you get a pretty good move down, close outside, and it tries 3 times to make a new low and can't. If it breaks above that, it's probably going higher on that triple test, so go with it. I only marked that green, but it's close. The only reason I marked it green and not blue is because we've already touched this upper side a couple of times, and we've got a leg up. But a lot of times you'll make 2 legs up, and I think that's what the market was wanting here, what prices were wanting. And you can see there's real close to 2 legs up there. And you might even argue to go short right here, other than the fact that it's an inside bar. We talked about that a lot. We've talked about that a lot. I think you're better off to wait on a lower high here, which comes here. But a lot of times when you get these high places like this or the failed break lower, if it's just 1 tick difference up there, and you got a lot of resistance or a lot of support below it and you're going long, you can take those. But there's no other resistance up here. So here you got to wait on a lower high or triple test or something. And you get that right there. Look at it go. You clearly get 2 more legs down, then a correction. That's just a first entry. Again, you should probably draw your trend line. And then that's just sideways. Nothing here but first entries until you make this low. So notice you got a break outside and a few swings to a new low, and then you make a higher low with a good signal bar. I like going long there. And that's a quick, easy move back up again. That's just a first entry, although there is a second entry here. I think that's too sideways and congested. It ends up moving up with no problem, but you just can't risk that. And then it turns down and the bottom just falls out. That's just a first entry, another first entry. First entry, and then next thing you know it's reversing here. But notice you do get the close outside, a couple of swings to a new low. Again, that's just a first entry. I don't think that really sets up for a reversal either. Runs all the way up, comes back. You do get a first entry, and by the time you even get a first or a second, you're already in the 230 hours. So no trades there. And then we just kind of chop sideways into the close, and we've reopened, and we're still going nowhere so far. So, but there it is. Mostly just size. It's a range day that closes near its highs, and it's a pretty wide range. Like I said, it was 50 points. I believe it was 50 points or so. I believe that's what it was. 42 points actually. So. Not the worst trading day by any means. Certainly to be a sideways range, it's not an easy range to trade, but just trade the trends within it. It's 40-point range. You can trade the trends within it. So just be careful getting short right into the lows or long right into the highs. Just make sure you got room to scalp out. That's the key to this. So will we fill this gap? Somebody else asked me if I thought we'd fill that gap. We'll go back to the old rule of filling gaps. It's 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, and so on. So it's the rule of threes is what that's one of the old wives' tales that kind of holds true. Usually you'll see us fill these gaps the same day or within a couple of days. So we could turn back down and retest these lows and try to fill that gap, but that's a pretty big gap on a really overdone day. So it's possible that we don't fill that gap, that we just keep going higher or keep working sideways for that matter. But we may not fill that gap because the market was just so overdone that we may not be able to get back down there again. Maybe the traders got it all out of their system on that one day, and we're only going higher from here. So, but again, we could turn off down at any point and try to fill that gap, and it wouldn't surprise me if it went straight down there and filled it, because that's what usually happens. So we'll see. But anyway, there it is. For a bank holiday, not surprising that there's not a lot of movement. This tends to be kind of how it is when your banks are closed. A lot of people aren't trading. A lot of professional traders aren't trading. They take this day off, even though it's not considered a trading day, a trading holiday. So it is what it is. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.